This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, The Truth, the Introduction. Not 24 hours after the funeral of Nigel Adonis St. James, Quincy Anders St. James IV was crowned the head of the St. James family. In attendance was Nigel's widow, Catherine, his right hand, Amir, Quincy, also known as Q's wife, Angela, his newly crowned right hand, Benjamin Woodrow Stevens Jr., also known as Woody or Big Wood, in the right hands of the other four heads, as well as their impending replacements. At the head of the Baptiste family was Q's mother, Bella Baptiste St. James. She'd replaced her brother Samuel and inherited his right hand, Marley. She was training her brother Samuel's only daughter, Salema, to be her replacement. Both the St. James family and the Baptiste family ruled the criminal underworld out of Trinidad. At the head of the Charles family out of St. Lucia was Idra, and he was training his sister Nadia and her husband Anand's only son, Stanley, to be his replacement. At his right hand was Etienne. The newest family to the five families, the Garcias out of Colombia, was headed by Alejandro. He also happened to be the second cousin of Q's right hand. And at the head of the five families was the Lopez family out of Puerto Rico. And on the throne was Emmanuel Lopez, the uncle of Q's wife Angela, and Angela's baby sister Stephanie, who was in training to be the head of the Lopez family. At Manny's right hand was Javier, and at Stephanie's was her best friend, True Joy Burton, who all the men who reported to her had started calling the Truth, because over the past few years, even more so in the past week, she's shown that she was the truth, and she wasn't nothing to play with. True was in an interesting position. Not only was she being trained to be the right hand of Stephanie, she, Stephanie, and Salema were all under the tutelage of the Queen Bee, and having been Stephanie's best friend for most of her life, she was more family than employee. And in a life where the best way to keep those you love safe was to ensure that as few people as possible knew that they were your love, the family connections, engagements, and marriages were not widely shared. True was the fiance of Big Wood, and other than those who were named, very few people had that information. In addition to those named, the heads of other organizations who were allies and associates of the five families were also in attendance. When the coronation concluded, and those not directly connected to the five families had departed, Manny made an announcement. He said, "This stays here. Understood? Q, you are now the head of the St. James family, in name only." And Angela almost fainted. The Queen Mother was shocked, and Big Wood was relieved. Q said, "I don't understand." Manny said, "Your grandfather insisted that your Uncle Nigel marry Catherine before he took his seat at the table. He knew that Catherine was much more adept at the politics and mental wrangling that are required to sit in that seat than his son was. Your father was his preference, and since he couldn't force or manipulate him into taking the seat, your Uncle Nigel was his consolation prize. The only way that the St. James family has survived is because of your Aunt Catherine. And despite the choices that your Uncle Nigel made, she stayed down. She kept the ship afloat, all of the pieces in play. I loved your father. I know that you being in this position doesn't honor him or his memory, but I had to find a compromise. I had to protect the organization and the five families while also honoring your father's wishes. So your Aunt Catherine has agreed to continue bearing the load. Amir and Big Wood will work together to keep you out of the line of fire and keep your hands as clean as possible. They'll also keep you well informed because decisions will be made with your name on them, and you'll always have first rights of refusal. But I suggest that you let Catherine do what she does best. She's been doing it for almost 40 years. And don't worry, you will earn your keep." Then the side door opened and in walked Sincere. Nigel Adonis St. James was a busy man. He had 5 children with a put-up in Miami, 2 sons and 3 daughters, triplets. If you watch Sins of the Father, you know all about that. If you watched the short story, The Stepmother, then you know all about all the work Catherine put in to get to this day. Manny said, your job is going to be to help get Sincere here, ready to take over his father's seat in his father's name. When the meeting concluded, Catherine went over to Angela and said, I told you, God's always got a ram in the bush, baby. Angela threw her arms around Catherine. She was so relieved. While her husband was still officially the head, Catherine was keeping him out of the fire. 2 years earlier, the family had all moved into a huge family complex in Denton, Texas. The agreement was that anyone who was in the life could not live in the complex. So the Queen Mother, Bella Baptiste, Salema, Stephanie, and True were all relegated to Angela and Stephanie's estate in Dallas. While both estates were very much secure, no one wanted to risk family beef following any of the players in the game back to the family complex. Stephanie's husband, or ex-husband, Corey, and their daughter Kari lived at the family complex in Denton, and they'd agreed to meet up at a house that Corey owned in Dallas near the church where he was the pastor. But because the ladies were in training to run organizations that were not headquartered in the contiguous United States, none of them actually called Dallas home. Stephanie and True lived in Puerto Rico. Salema and the Queen Mother lived in Trinidad. Salema's husband Waz and True's fiance, Big Wood, lived in Dallas. So leading up to the coronation, Angela had some questions. She said, how are you going to lead the St. James family from Denton? Or do you plan to move out of our home and move to Trinidad? Q said, love, I have no idea how we going to work out all these logistics. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to stay home with you and our children. Angela said, so you know, I am not moving to Trinidad. I've moved my business from North Carolina to Denver and now to Dallas. And I actually like it here. My business is flourishing. Our children are flourishing. We are not uprooting them and moving them to a foreign country. Q said, did you hear me? I said, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to stay right here with you and our children. I'm not asking you to move anywhere. I'm not going to ask you to move anywhere. Angela said, but what if? Q said, love, stop worrying. It's not good for our babies. Angela and Q already had 5 children. 14-year-old Michael from a previous relationship that Q had. 14-year-old Melissa, who Angela took in when both of her parents died. Those parents just happened to be Angela's older sister and her previous husband. You'll have to go back to the very first season to figure all that out. And almost 10-year-old Angel, who was the product of Angela's first marriage. And 2-year-old twins, Isla and V, or Quincy the Fifth. And now, they were expecting twins again. Neither the pregnancy nor the multiples have been confirmed by a doctor, but Q has an uncanny ability to know exactly what's going on with his wife's body, and he's assumed the role of pregnancy announcer. So as everyone exits the meeting room, Q goes over to Angela and says, I guess that answers your question about how we stay in Denton. Angela said, I think that it's important that we discuss this with everyone else and make sure that they're comfortable with it, though. Q said, you're right. I want everybody to feel safe, and they should all know what's at stake. When we get home, you put something together with the women, and I'll put something together with the fellas. A little over a week later, they both had done just that. Q's brother Donovan was finally free. If you watch Sins of the Father, then you know that Donovan had been missing for 2 weeks. A woman he'd met while he was getting mental health treatment in a psychiatric facility had fallen head over heels in love with him and had conspired with her lifelong friend Jeff, who turned out to be the illegitimate son of Quincy Anders St. James II, to kidnap Donovan, get freaky with him on video, so that Jeff could use that video to get freaky with Maribel. Maribel being Dr. Maribel Lopez, the youngest daughter of Emmanuel Lopez, the head of the Lopez family, the first cousin of Angela and Stephanie, and the love of Donovan's life. So when Q assembled the fellas at the complex in Denton and Angela assembled the ladies, Maribel and Donovan were both absent. Q called Donovan on the phone and let him know what was up. And Donovan said, bro, I don't care where you live at. Please don't call me no more. Q said, aight, bro. Enjoy yourself. And over at Angela and Q's house, Angela said, I am so glad that Maribel came around. Donovan's plan may have been unorthodox, but in the end, things turned out exactly the way they should have. Renni said, that's easy for you to say. He is pissed at me, and he's probably never going to speak to me again the rest of my life. Stephanie said, girl, who cares? He didn't need to have a baby with that crazy behind woman. He did what he could. And if she said the sinner's prayer and she really meant it, then she's in heaven. Renni said, that's what I said. In all fairness, I had no way to know that the heifer was actually pregnant. Stephanie said, well, you could have waited and found out before you shot her, Renni. Renni said, if that was the goal, then Manny should have included me in that conversation that he had with Maribel and the Queen Mother. He didn't. They promised not to lay a finger on her. Not me. When Renni and Maribel had Jeff tied up, and they'd gotten the information that they needed to get their hands on the cell phone that he'd been using to communicate with Portia, they were able to access the system that was controlling the explosive devices at the cabin where she was holding Donovan. While Portia was the only one who knew the codes, they were able to see when the devices were armed and when they were disarmed. Within a few days of watching, they discovered that Portia armed them every night before she went to sleep, and that once she disarmed them, she had to put in a secure code to prevent them from automatically rearming themselves. She had the ability to detonate them with a press of a button, but she also had the ability to change her mind by entering a code before the countdown completed. And as the soldiers assigned to monitor the surveillance in the cell phone continued to do so over the next few days, they discovered that Portia was leaving the devices disarmed more and more. Eventually, she and Donovan started venturing out of the cabin. They were having picnic lunches outside and going to the store to buy more supplies. One day, they even went shopping at the mall, went back to the cabin, got all gussied up, and went out on a date. They went to a movie and out to eat. And according to Portia on the surveillance video, that was the first time she'd ever been on a date in her life. She cried, and Donovan held her. That was also the first night that she didn't make Donovan sleep with her. Instead, he held her and affirmed her. He poured into her and prayed over her. And the next day, when she woke up vomiting, they went to a local pharmacy, bought a pack of pregnancy tests, and came back to the cabin. Portia took the tests, and they celebrated. And what the soldiers knew, and no one else did, is that the intimacy that ensued after the emotional celebration of Portia's pregnancy could not have been faked. Donovan tenderly and lovingly undressed Portia, laid her down in the bed in the cabin, and caressed and kissed every inch of her. And then he made slow, passionate love to Portia. It got so hot, heavy, passionate, and darn near divine that the soldiers who'd been watching Donovan do his thing for days were uncomfortable. They couldn't watch. One of the soldiers said, this nigga making me want to call my old lady and see if she can come through right quick. The other one said, right. Got me ready to break all the damn rules. When Stacks, the general who was assigned to the safe house, and the soldiers who were assigned there, walked past the room, he said, what the hell is y'all watching, a porno? Turn that down. The soldier said, nah, this nigga in here making love to the broad. Stacks said, what? The soldier said, she just took a pregnancy test. It was positive. They're celebrating. Stacks said, this nigga a fool. Those devices still disarmed. The soldier looked at the phone and said, yeah, they've been disarmed for like 2 days. Stacks said, I'm ready to get out of here. I'm about to call the truth and see what she's trying to do. When True told the Queen Mother about the pregnancy test, about the devices, and about what Donovan was doing to Portia, the Queen Mother said, and we are not doing anything that's going to put my son in danger. Don't tell anybody about this pregnancy test, especially not Maribel. If I know my son, they'll be walking out of there whenever they wrap this lovemaking session up. And just like she said, 2 hours later, she got a phone call from Donovan. He said, Medea, I'm going to need you to send some folks over who can do cleanup at this cabin. They need to know how to handle explosives. Queen Mother said, where are you, son? Donovan said, I'm safe. When the cabin's been handled, I'll give you my location. Then you, I, and Portia need to sit down and talk. The Queen Mother said, talk? I don't want to sit down and talk to her. Why should I send anybody in there to clean up her mess? Donovan said, she's pregnant, Medea. Do this for me, Medea. please. Then Donovan and Portia watched on the cell phone as the cleanup crew did precisely what Donovan asked. The explosive guy that Big Wood knew went in and neutralized all the devices, and along with a hefty paycheck, he got to keep all the bits and pieces for himself. When it was all done, the Queen Mother called the phone back and said, "It's done. Now what? I'm not about to play with y'all." Donovan chuckled and said, "All right, Medea, let's meet at the landing strip. I need to get Portia back to Dallas so she can go back to treatment. Don't tell anybody that she's pregnant. I want to be the one to do that. But make it clear to everybody that it's hands off. They gonna have to see me." The Queen Mother said, "Okay, fine, Donovan." When the Queen Mother called True to tell her the plan, she had no idea that Maribel and Renni were eavesdropping on the entire conversation. Maribel right there with her at the St. James estate, and Renni in the room with True at the safe house. When True hung up, Renni said, "Yep, I'm going." True said, "Renni, you do not need to go." Renni said, "The hell I don't. After all I did to help save that man's life, I think I deserve to be right there to see him free." True said, "Okay, I'm gonna let the Queen Mother know though." They got in the car and prepared to meet the Queen Mother at the airstrip. At the same time, Maribel was saying to the Queen Mother, "I'm going with you." Queen Mother said, "No, Maribel, you don't want to do that." Maribel said, "Yes, I do. After all I did to free him, I need to see him." The Queen Mother said, "But he's going to be transporting Portia." Maribel said, "I don't care about that. I need to see him." The Queen Mother said, "Fine, Maribel. Let's go." Then they got in the car and headed to the airstrip. The Queen Mother and Maribel arrived first, and waiting on the tarmac was Donovan, with Portia sitting inside the rental car. When the Queen Mother and Maribel approached, Donovan was smiling. When Maribel took off running towards him, he had his arms open wide. She fell in them and started crying. And Donovan held her, kissed her, and stroked her back and said, "It's all right. I'm all right. Everything's gonna be all right. Are you all right? Did Jeff hurt you?" Maribel said, "No, he didn't." "You've missed a lot." Donovan said, "I can imagine. Can you please meet me at home? We need to talk. I'm just taking her to treatment. I love you, Maribel. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. If you meet me at home, I promise I'll explain it all to you." Portia knows that. She understands it. Believe me, I hate that all of this happened, but it had to happen. Just give me a few more hours to get her settled at treatment. Go to my house. Wait for me there. Please. Maribel said, "Okay, Donovan, okay." When the Queen Mother walked up, she said, "Ain't you a sight for sore eyes? You are your father's son." And hearing those words, Donovan dissolved into tears. The Queen Mother grabbed her baby boy and held him while he cried. He said, "All I've ever wanted to do was make my father proud, was make you proud." The Queen Mother said, "You have. I don't agree with everything that you did, but clearly it worked. I hope you plan to explain all of this to Maribel." Donovan said, I do. And while the Queen Mother was holding Donovan and having that private moment, True and Renni pulled up. Renni, who hadn't gotten the tap about hands off of Portia and had no idea that Portia was with child, ran up like she was going to embrace Donovan, despite the fact that he was already in his mother's arms. And then she ran right past him, up to the car, pulled a 9mm from a holster at her back, and fired 3 shots into the car. Donovan screamed, "No!" while True ran up and grabbed the gun out of Renni's hand. At the same time, Donovan tackled Renni, and Maribel ran over to the car, trying to render aid. Not because she wanted to save Portia, but because that was her natural instincts as a doctor. The Queen Mother, immediately thinking of her grandchild, called for a doctor, and True ran over to help Maribel. Only one of the bullets that Renni shot into the car actually hit Portia. And as Maribel and True did the best that they could to apply pressure to the wound to her chest, Maribel called out to the soldiers assigned to the airstrip to go inside the facility's building and bring out the emergency kit. She knew that there had to be one. All airstrips were required to have them. When they returned with it, her and True went to work. They did the best that they could until the doctor arrived. And since they could not call 911, they had very little hope that they'd be able to save Portia's life. When the doctor pulled up, he had 2 assistants with him, who quickly assessed Portia and threw her in the back seat of the vehicle. As the driver drove off, they all heard the doctor say, "It's too late. She's gone." And Donovan lost it.